So a major focus of the Grade 9 Social Studies curriculum in Alberta is the call for teachers to help students become active and responsible citizens, to construct meaning through lived experiences and appreciate how multiple perspectives shape Canada's political, social, and cultural realities, and become aware of their capacity to affect change in their communities. In order to engage with this curricular vision, we wanted to focus on examining the Indian Act and Treaties 6, 7, and 8 through the lens of the historical and contemporary relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. We started brainstorming a few ideas, and then Dave showed me the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, the cycle in there that just right away spoke to me and stood out for me, and then the word relationship, coming into this unit, looking at it in terms of a relationship, really humanizing the Aboriginal perspective, the non-Aboriginal perspective, and then being able to take it up in that way. We came up with the idea of having students communicate their understanding of the relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people through an artistic and textual representation of a particular historical event and its impact. Young people live in relationships, so looking at it through the lens of a relationship really made sense to me. And I think a lot of the ways in which they understand Aboriginal people's role in history, and specifically in Canada, has been through a real kind of dichotomy. It was really a them and us.
We've got one frame of reference over here and another frame of reference over here, and there's like this disconnect. And of course, that disconnect is a legacy of colonialism, because I see colonialism as an extended process of denying relationship, whether it be with the places where we live, or our head and our heart, or people who look different from us. So it's a curricular and pedagogical imperative, because the way you think about the relationship has a distinctive bearing on how you take it up in the classroom. And we're not going to get everybody to agree on how they should think about the relationship. But what I'm arguing, I guess, is that we need to be very attentive to the dynamics that are there.
To give students some historical context, we began by having them work on an activity where they were asked to create a timeline that included perspectives of First Nations and the Canadian government on the Indian Act and numbered treaties. We then introduced a series of documentaries selected in order to expose students to another narrative and to honor the authentic voices of Aboriginal people and their experiences. Following each of the videos, students engaged in class discussions and reflective blog posts that encouraged them to document their evolving understanding around a series of major themes. We were careful to develop some criteria with students around how to structure their responses in order to communicate personal, critical perspectives rather than just simple, objective summaries.
The one lady, when she was in the residential schools, how she was raped constantly by the men in there, and then another lady said it too. So when you have more than one person saying that, it's kind of like it's one of those like whoa kind of moments where it was just like it was eye-opening.
Lack of knowledge bedevils the relationship. This speaks true for the relationship between Aboriginals and non-Aboriginals of Canada. So much of the prejudice and judgmental mindset for people of different groups is a result of the ignorance surrounding people when it comes to Aboriginals' culture and history.
One of the videos that we watched as a class that proved particularly powerful was a TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, in which Chimamanda Adichie warns that when we hear only a single story about any people, we risk critical misunderstanding.
It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is Nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of Nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story.
Since I was young and able to form views and opinions for myself, I have viewed myself as superior and above Aboriginals. My views have formed around the stereotypes that I picked up from distant relatives and neighbors and family friends. I knew little about them, yet I felt I could judge them, an entire group of people, based on stereotypes.
With the hidden secrets of Canadian history uncovered to me by the Eighth Fire documentary series, my studies, and the following diagram, I already have a chance to change my opinions regarding the First Nations people.
As part of this process, we had students read excerpts from the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. It describes 4 stages of the historical relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people: separate worlds, contact and cooperation, displacement and assimilation, and negotiation and renewal. Students were assigned a particular stage in the cycle and asked to generate 4 adjectives and accompanying images that they felt described the relationship during that stage in history. From within that stage, students were asked to identify a single event that they felt deeply reflected the nature of the relationship at this time. So we had Dr. Terry Lynn Fox from Mount Royal University. She spoke about treaties and about the spirit in which treaties came about and how they were negotiated, how they were signed. She's a Blackfoot woman herself. She talked about her life growing up. So I think that was really powerful for the students.
For them, it wasn't just a piece of paper, but it was an agreement with the land and the nature, and something that they would they promised to kind of care for it and have a mutual peace with it.
They basically just destroyed the First Nations connection with the land by pushing them over onto smaller, crappier pieces of land and kind of destroying almost like their whole culture and religion. Without really, they probably didn't even know that. I don't think they really knew what they were doing. But
there's just a basic misunderstanding and a change of views. Like the whites have always seen land as something to be owned or something to not be owned, and the Aboriginals have seen it as something more of a communal space, a public space, if you want. And that, so overall, the whites thought they were buying the land, and the Aboriginals thought they were sharing the land. And the Aboriginals thought they were fighting for peace, and the whites thought they were just fighting for a profit. So just a basic misunderstanding, it led to so many conflicts.
The school was also able to host Dr. Dwayne Donald, a leading scholar from the University of Alberta, who through provocative video clips, questions, and stories helped us explore the complexity of the relationships underlying treaties. Dr. Donald encouraged students, pre-service teachers, and community members to engage critically and creatively in grappling with difficult questions through roundtable discussion. In the final stage of this inquiry, students were worked on putting together their artistic and textual understandings of historically significant events in collaboration with classmates and with ongoing feedback from teachers. Once their collages and artistic statements were complete, they were eager to showcase their work and to share their evolved understanding with pre-service teachers at both Mount Royal University and the University of Calgary.
One of the things we immediately identified was that need to try to showcase student work, to try to provide a forum where the students could represent their learning in a space where they're talking with people. And I think there's like a real natural there's natural allies between the university pre-service teachers and the field.
We saw like the facts just isolated from the events and the actual people that experienced those events.
Grade 1, it was all like grade 1 to 4, it was all Buffalo.
A list of dates and a list of events that corresponded to those dates. And we'd learn the logistics of it, you know, what happened, what agreements were made, and that's basically it. But through this project, we learned that we only scratched the surface.
We only hear, we don't only hear, but we normally hear the European perspective.
Enigmatic would be a proper term.
Okay.
Like we hear them as a thing, not really a people.
Like there's a reserve that's right over there. Like you just hear stories, and it's like, oh well, you don't really know what's going on over there. But after doing this whole project, it was really like it flipped the whole thing from thinking negatively about them.
Before this, I had a simple view of what was happening with the Aboriginals and their problems with alcohol and drugs. But now that we've gone through this project and I see both sides, I can understand the issues and where they're coming from and how they can be resolved.
This project, it really humanized history for me. Talking to like actual First Nations, we saw how they were really affected as a people and like the implications that historical actions have even today.
There needs to be more sincere apologies, not just apologies, but also like the fact like we have to look in the past. We have to see what you did wrong, but those are to learn from. Those aren't to stay in. Like
If people hear the truth, I feel like they won't judge the First Nations as much, and it'll actually help them more.
It was the front matter of the social studies curriculum that really spoke to me. Relationships, so living in a pluralistic society, social cohesion. In this project, I think we were really purposeful about how we took up all of that front matter as well as the specific curricular outcomes.